Good morning. I was sitting there and I realized that that wasn't the song that I had thought I wanted to play, but I actually like this song better. Yesterday I was trying to find the perfect song for this message, and I ended up choosing Hard Love, which is actually a really good song too. And then Mike asked me this morning, what song did you want me to play for your offering song? And I was like, I don't remember. And I went on YouTube and I was like, oh, I think this is it. And I sent it to him. But I actually like this one better, so it worked out well. I apologize for my face today. My sister and brother-in-law and myself hiked Mount Elbert yesterday, which is the tallest mountain in Colorado. And we did not bring sunglasses. And there was snow on the mountains, so we had 9 hours of sun reflecting off of the snow into our faces. And so the lights look really bright today. Hopefully I'll make it through service. So I was actually, when I went hiking yesterday, I was like, I bet I could use some of this for my message tomorrow, because I'm going to be talking about challenges. But I realized that what I really want to talk about today is the really different kind of challenge, because when you go hiking, that's something you choose to do. And you know it's going to be hard, and you know there's a reward, and so you stick it out despite all this for the reward at the top and the experience of it. And I found that actually it didn't have to do with what I really wanted to talk about today, which is how God is recreating us through our challenges, and most often through the challenges that we don't choose that come up in our life. So I want to start with a Bible quote. This is from Psalms 46, 1 through 2 and 7. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. So I have a question for you. How are you doing? Awesome. I heard one great. That means I know how everybody else is doing. I went to a birthday party last Sunday after church, and I asked the dad there, I was like, so how have you been doing? He's like, all right. And I was like, okay. And then somebody else arrived at the birthday party and asked me how I was doing. I was like, all right. and I was like, is that really as good as anybody can be doing right now? All right. But sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes life can end up feeling more challenging than it should. Unexpected things pop up that we didn't think that we would have to deal with. Sometimes we're left feeling just overwhelmed by everything that's going on, like 2 steps behind where we should be, or like just barely keeping our eyes above the waves in an ocean. But before I get too much into my message, what I want to share is that there is value in these times. The trouble is, when you're in it, when you're in those times and the struggle's right in front of your face, it's very often difficult to see the value of that time. So how do we get to a place where we can recognize that there is value, or what we can gain out of it, or how God is trying to grow our heart, or how God is trying to recreate us through the experiences in our life? So I thought back to when I was in my missions program, and my first year when we got started, they continually talked about these few different things, kind of attitudes in your life of faith, but foundational attitudes that we can develop to help us digest and go through the experiences that we have in our life. And as I continued in my missions program, I realized that every year, at the beginning of the year, they would talk about these things. Things like gratitude, having an attitude of gratitude. The relationship that God has to us as a parent, because many people don't their experiences of God or experiences of religion separates many times God from us. So God as a parent, how to take God's perspective. And also, one of the main things that we talked about every year at the beginning of the year was this concept of growth through challenges. And I would get very frustrated at my team leader when I would say, "Oh, I'm just really struggling." She's like, "Good, that's good for you." That means you're growing. I'm like, don't tell me that. So when I first started, I didn't think too much of why we learned about these certain things at what times. But as time went on, I realized the value of repeatedly reviewing these kind of foundational concepts. Because without basics, we can never go to deeper concepts or develop more in our life. It's the same in every aspect. My kids have started a new school program this year, which is fun. And my daughter just went into 3rd grade. And she's been doing addition and subtraction. And she said, "Mom, this year I want to work on multiplication." And I don't even remember. I think I just learned like flashcards and memorization facts with multiplication. But what she's doing is she's grouping 3 threes together to make 9. You know, it's like adding 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. So 3 times 3 is 9. And without the foundational understanding of addition, actually, you'll never really get the concept of multiplication, right? And without understanding multiplication, then you can't divide it back up into smaller groups. Without multiplication and division, then you can't get into the decimals that my boys are struggling with right now. So, that's fun. But in the same way, you know, unless we have these foundational attitudes in our life or basics in our life of faith, such as understanding who God really is in relationship to me, the reality of God's character, the principles of how God works in our life, then we won't really be able to have deep experiences in our life of faith. We won't be able to discover God on deeper and deeper levels. And it's very likely we'll just be kind of trapped in our environment and reacting to the things that happen to us rather than being able to digest them and grow through them. So I do feel it's really valuable to, many of you have heard this before, but I feel like it's so valuable to be reminded of the value of challenges in our life. And with that, it's okay to be doing all right. I'm glad everyone Tete is doing great. But it's okay to be doing all right. It's okay to even be not doing all right. Sometimes in life, we're just struggling our brains out. I can't think of anybody who's just kind of been like, life is good all the time, you know. It's good to be honest with what we are feeling. But the key is then to recognize when we are in these moments. Then we can also recognize the opportunities for growth, or we can see the ways in which God is actually speaking to us or trying to help us develop a part of ourselves through the challenge. And that often on the other side of the challenges, God is waiting with blessings for us. God doesn't want us to be the way we've always been, to think the way we've always thought, and to do things the way we've always done them. Sometimes that's hard to accept because we get comfortable with where we're at. But I really believe that God wants to recreate us so we're not in the same place all the time. This is a quote by Reverend Moon. Oh, all right, next one. You must re-examine yourself in an objective way. If you find that you still think and act like you used to, and if your goal is just to lead a happy life in the worldly sense, this is not right. Jesus said that when you want to gain your life, you will lose it. I know many people who, both sides of this. I know people who face challenges in their life, terrible tragedies in their life. I was actually considering a video that I didn't show today that it kind of was a monologue or interview of 6 different people who'd just been through unimaginable things in their life. Getting tumors in their brain when they're 21 years old, your stepfather committing suicide on your 12th birthday, being in an accident where you were pronounced dead for an hour, and then having to rebuild your life from there. A woman who had been sold into sex trafficking when she was 12 years old by her mother. Just like unimaginable challenges. But the attitudes that they found and developed through it made them the most beautiful people with such strength, and people that they could help other people who had been through challenges like them. I also know people who go through challenges, and for the rest of their life, they will be talking about that time of their life and how terrible it was and how there are so many people to blame for the misery that they went through. And it's like they're practically still living in the challenge, even though it happened 20 years ago. So without developing the perspective on our challenge, a godly perspective, we can even come through to the other side. We can make it to the other side of our challenge and still be living in it. Be so focused on the struggle that we can't see the new place that we're in. So it makes you think and realize that actually it's not so much the challenge itself that's creating our misery or our difficulty. It's actually whatever's going on inside of me. So I have a little story. This year, I was really into gardening. I had lots of time in quarantine, and I grew tomatoes from seed for the first time. I've always been intimidated by growing tomatoes from seed. I always buy them once they're already this tall and put them in the ground when it's already warm outside. But somebody had given me some tomato seeds, so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And I didn't know what to do, so I looked up online. And there is so much to go into growing tomato seeds inside, into plants. And one of the things that surprised me, I'm part of this gardening group on Facebook, Colorado Gardeners, and something that so many people posted about was that they were trying to grow their tomatoes from seed, and they were getting kind of long and spindly, or they put them outside for a day and then they like fell over and broke. And everybody's like, oh, you guys are newbies. This is what you got to do. If you grow tomatoes from seed, you have to have a fan nearby them blowing on them, because that will develop their strength. Because when they go outside, indoors, there's not breeze, there's not wind, there's not storms to knock them over or to hurt them. But if you don't provide a breeze to strengthen them when they're inside, then when you put them outside, then they'll get knocked over at the first storm. And I thought, that's a pretty good analogy. I can use that somewhere. They need to be pushed gently so that they can develop the strength to survive. And this last week, with a snowstorm, it's like summertime. It was 90 degrees, and then there's a snowstorm. In this Facebook group that I'm part of, everybody's scrambling, freaking out. How can I cover my tomatoes? How can I take care of my babies? And this one woman posted, today I had to choose which one of my babies survived and which ones died. I was crying. And it's kind of silly to think of your plants as your children, but it did make me think of how we are with our own children sometimes. Sometimes parents purposefully need to challenge their children. I've been doing that with my kids. So my kids have been going to martial arts class for, I think 3 to 4 years now. And at this point, they're pretty tired of it. They ask me every few weeks, when are we done with martial arts? And I say, when you've got your black belt. And sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, but I really want them to learn how to follow through with something, to accomplish a goal, and to feel the satisfaction of having done that. So I keep convincing them to go back and try again and get to their next belt. And I know it's not always pleasant for them to have to pack up their stuff and to get in the car and to sweat for 30 or 40 minutes. And I hope that they don't resent me for it. But I feel it's so important for them to gain this type of experience. And so sometimes I push them. That's a type of challenge our kids can go through, one that we kind of construct for them, for their benefit. Sometimes we see our kids go through challenges that just, they brought it on themselves, let's say. Maybe you have a kid who's flunked their math test and like, well, what did you do all week? Oh, I was skateboarding and I was playing with my friends and I was playing video games and you're like, okay. That, we need to do better, but you know that that's something that they created. But they have to face the challenge of that afterwards. And then sometimes we see our kid go through challenges that just seem unfair, and we wish we didn't have to go through them. Sometimes a kid is maybe bullied at school, or sometimes we have a child come down with an illness, or sometimes we have a child who gets into an accident. And it seems like they didn't deserve that. Why does my child have to go through this? And they, I'm sure, are thinking the same thing. So there's different types of challenges, but I realize that there's a kind of an X factor or a constant thing that determines how they make it through. And that is the relationship that the child has with their parents. If a child has a relationship of trust with their parents and feels and is in a relationship where they can receive and feel the love of their parents, then when a parent pushes them to go to martial arts class, then they somehow, maybe not in the moment, but they'll get, that's because my mom loves me and she wants me to grow. I know that I trust my mom and I know that there's something behind this, so they can receive it. Also, if a child has to go through challenges because of mistakes that they made, if they have a relationship of trust with their parents, they can go to their parents and say, how do I do better? I know that this was something that I caused, but I don't know how to change it. So what can I do better? With that kind of a relationship, a parent can then guide and help. And sometimes these challenges are just unfair. I remember reading a book called On Fire by John O'Leary. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was, when he was a child, around 7 or 8 years old, he, not so accidentally, but unintentionally, lit a can of gasoline on fire and it exploded and it covered his whole body with gasoline and he was burned like 99% of his body. And it's not something that he deserved, something that should happen to any child. But if you read his story, he's such an inspiring person because of the lessons that he's learned through it, and he credits his parents for helping him to gain a perspective on how to grow through it, how to become a better person through it. So the problem is not necessarily what each one of us is going through. I know people who go through terrible things and are the most wonderful people, and I know people who seem to have everything. They've got the beautiful family, they have enough money, they've got a nice car, they've got a stable job, they live in a beautiful place, and we can still be struggling our brains out over our own value or any number of smaller things, but we can still struggle so much. So when looking at that, we realize that it's more about my perspective and my relationship with my parent. If we transition from looking at our children and me as parents, we can also see that this applies to our relationship with God as our parent. Oh, I found a couple of quotes I felt really illustrated these two different types of perspectives well. This was, if you keep on doing things but hate to do the job, hate where you are, resent the people who put you there. However long you may work in that way, 10 years, more than 10 years, what you have done will be nullified and there will be nothing gained. However, on the other hand, we overcome difficult situations through paying indemnity. After the price is paid, the worst thing becomes valuable. And the worst unhappiness turns into happiness. And I think that whatever situation you're in, this can actually be applied. So the difficult thing is that this comes down to our own personal relationship with God. It comes down to each one of us examining how real is my relationship with God? How much do I trust God as my parent? Even in the struggle that I'm in, do I believe that God is showing me a way to overcome and resemble him more on the other side? Because the same way that we are with our children, we want to help them. We don't like to see our children go through challenges. We don't want to see them struggle. Even if we push them to struggle, we don't want them to be struggling. I feel like God is the same way. He feels our pain when we're in pain. He struggles with us when we're in struggle. But God's hope is always for us to come out on the other side resembling him more, loving more, stronger, to be able to help not just myself, but to help my family, help my neighbors, help this world more. Sometimes will give us challenges to strengthen us. Sometimes we face challenges because of our own choices, let's face it. Sometimes we don't always make the best choices, and we have to deal with the struggles that maybe come out of that. But it doesn't mean that God is blaming us. God knows why we made those choices. God has compassion for us. And still, on the other side of that, wants us to grow and to expand our heart. And sometimes there just doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason for what we're going through. I know that God, as a parent, is right here with us. He's feeling it with us. He's rooting for us. And he's there waiting with the best advice and the best encouragement and the best guidance if we trust God enough to go to him and ask for it. So with that is basically my message today. I just want to share. And I know this is something I have to remind myself for. I feel like in some ways, I love a challenge. I love to go up a 14er. I like to choose my challenges, though. I realize that still, even despite these reminders that I got, the education that I got, there's still a part of me that has to remind myself when I'm like, oh, why is this like this? Why does the school year have to change? Why is COVID like this? Why is this snowstorm come and smash my plants? It's easy to get triggered by things and to get caught up in, why? But it's a good practice to remind yourself that when you're triggered, that there's a foundational attitude that is more important than any of the things that happen to us. So I know I'm working on it still, and it's a practice. It's a practice of reminding ourselves and also going to God and asking for God's guidance and strengthening that parent-child relationship with God. And I don't care if you're 70 or if you're 7 years old, we can always strengthen our relationship with God more, and that will always help us go through the challenges we face. So please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for a beautiful, gorgeous week, a gorgeous day. Heavenly Parent, we feel your unending love for us, through nature and through each other, Heavenly Parent. But sometimes, even when the weather is beautiful outside, it's difficult for us to feel your love because there's so many things going on in our lives. There's so many things going on in this world. There's so many things going on inside of our own hearts, Heavenly Parent. But I pray that we can just take a minute, recognize what we're feeling, and realize that wherever we're at, you have a next step prepared for us. You have a blessing prepared for us. You're opening a door for us to walk through to become more like you, more loving, more strong, Heavenly Parent. And I just pray that we can recognize, and it's hard, when we're in the challenge, it's so hard to step out of it, but I pray that we can take that moment and recognize you in our life through all the ups and downs, Heavenly Parent. Thank you so much for your guidance. We want to go into this week with you with renewed determination to fight the good fight. Know that that we have a light that's ready to shine. We have a light that can help other people, and that you are ready to help us every step of the way. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Doña Hendrick, blessed your family. Adieu.